me as I dive deep into America's most haunting secrets and see if I can uncover the truth that's been hidden for so long. Are secrets that lie hidden beneath the surface of America's history. Secrets that have been buried for centuries and secrets that continue to haunt us to this day. And today, we're going to uncover one of the most shocking and eerie secrets that has been hiding in plain sight. The mystery surrounding the Dyatlov Pass incident has puzzled historians and the public alike for decades. It's a story of 9 experienced hikers who embarked on an expedition to the Ural Mountains, only to meet a tragic and inexplicable demise. The incident has sparked countless theories, from alien encounters to military experiments gone wrong. But one thing remains certain: something sinister lurks behind these events. The lack of evidence and the eerie atmosphere surrounding the incident have only added to the enigma. The investigation that followed was shrouded in secrecy, fueling speculation and sparking a wave of conspiracy theories. As the years went by, the Dyatlov Pass incident became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the unknown terrors that lurk in the most remote corners of our world. Despite the numerous investigations and research, the truth behind the Dyatlov Pass incident remains a mystery. Theories have been proposed, but none have been able to fully explain the events that unfolded that fateful night. It's as if the truth has been deliberately hidden, waiting for someone brave enough to uncover it. The Dyatlov Pass incident has its roots in the Cold War era, a time of paranoia and secrecy. The Soviet Union was a powerhouse of espionage and subterfuge, and the Ural Mountains were a hotspot of military activity. It's possible that the hikers stumbled upon something they shouldn't have, something that cost them their lives. The incident has had a profound impact on American culture, inspiring books, movies, and documentaries. It's a testament to our morbid fascination with the unknown and our desire to uncover the truth that lies hidden beneath the surface. But what's most striking about the Dyatlov Pass incident is its ability to evoke fear and unease. Even to this day, in the end, the Dyatlov Pass incident serves as a reminder that there are forces beyond our understanding, forces that can strike at any moment without warning. It's a chilling thought, one that has haunted Americans for decades, and will continue to do so until the truth is finally revealed. As we delve deeper into the heart of America's most haunting secrets, left with more questions than answers. What really happened on that fateful night in the Ural Mountains? What secrets lie hidden behind the Dyatlov Pass incident? Thanks for joining me on this journey into the unknown. If you have any theories or thoughts on the Dyatlov Pass incident, please share them in the comments below. And if you're ready for more spine-tingling mysteries, be sure to check out my next video, where we'll uncover even more of America's most haunting secrets.
Part 1, Echoes in the Cold. The Dyatlov Pass incident lingered in the back of my mind like a dark song, its grim mystery tantalizing, unfinished. 9 experienced hikers, all dead in inexplicable ways, their last trek left a horror that echoed through generations. The grisly details of their deaths were only outshone by their eerie circumstances: tents shredded from the inside, bodies half-naked in the snow, missing eyes, tongues. It didn't seem real. I was drawn to it the way some people are drawn to a steep cliff's edge. Maybe it's our own instinct for danger. That's what brought me to that small, forgotten library on the edge of town. The librarian there, a hunched man with yellowed, cracked fingernails, gave me a look that told me he knew exactly why I'd come. He didn't say a word, just shuffled away into the dim stacks, the musty smell of old leather and parchment filling the silence. He returned with a brittle, ancient-looking book bound in blackened leather. Its cover was bare, no title, no author. I could have sworn the room grew colder when he handed it over. "Be careful what you read in there," he muttered. I settled into a dim corner, the only light a weak bulb flickering above. The book was fragile in my hands, pages nearly translucent from age. The words, handwritten in small, meticulous script, told a version of the Dyatlov Pass incident that never made it to the official files. It described a darkness older than the mountains themselves, something no longer bound by human understanding. One passage, in particular, caught my attention. The 9 travelers had stumbled upon forbidden ground, a place marked by old gods who had abandoned it long ago. And yet, something of them remained, a fury that neither froze nor died. Asterisk. The phrase haunted me. I kept reading, eyes widening with every revelation, but then, something moved at the edge of my vision. A tall, dark figure stood in the shadows of the library. Its form was barely there, like smoke curling into the shape of a man. It was tall, unnaturally thin, its head cocked at an angle as if it were studying me. My fingers gripped the book tighter, my pulse thrumming against its brittle pages. "Lost in the past, are we?" came a voice, raspy and almost mocking. I looked around, but the librarian was nowhere to be seen. The voice had come from the shadows. The figure didn't move, yet somehow, it seemed to creep closer, as if the darkness itself was shifting around it. I wanted to leave, wanted to close the book and run, but something held me there, rooted to my chair. It was like my mind had split into two halves, one that urged me to escape, and one that wanted to listen. "Those hikers, they didn't stumble upon anything," the voice said, its tone low and soft, almost like a whisper shared between conspirators. "They were invited." Invited? The word slipped out before I could stop it. The figure didn't respond, only tilted its head a little more, an unnatural bend that made the shadows around it shiver. "Close the book," it rasped. "Or join them in your own story." The words snapped me out of my trance. I shut the book, the weight of its pages echoing in the silence. When I looked up, the figure was gone. The library felt smaller, the air thinner, as if the room itself was squeezing me out. I couldn't get out fast enough, pushing through the heavy oak doors and into the freezing night air. But the chill didn't leave me. It clung to my skin, my breath misting in the air even after I stepped into the warmth of my car. As I drove home, the passage I had read replayed in my mind on an endless loop, forbidden ground, fury that neither froze nor died. And the figure's last words echoed, even darker, invited. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, images of the hikers' mutilated bodies flashed behind my lids. I could almost feel the snow beneath my feet, the icy wind biting at my skin. Around 3 in the morning, as I lay there, a faint scratching sound began from somewhere in my house. It was soft at first, like the wind brushing against the window. But then it grew louder, more insistent. It wasn't coming from the window but from inside the walls. The scratching grew steadily louder, clawing through the silence of my darkened room. It sounded like nails scraping through drywall, slow and deliberate. My skin prickled, and the air felt charged, heavy, like before a thunderstorm. I reached for my phone, checking the time, 3:03 a.m. The Dyatlov Pass incident had marked this hour too. The hikers, according to one of the files I'd read online, were said to have left their tents in a frenzy around this same time, scattering barefoot into the snow, fleeing something unknown. What had they seen? What horror had stirred them from safety and warmth to their brutal deaths? As if in answer, the scratching stopped. I sat up in bed, listening, my heart hammering against my ribs. The silence felt unnaturally deep, thickening like oil. And then, there was a soft whispering, faint but distinct, coming from directly below me. I didn't dare move. The whispering grew clearer, rising through the floorboards. It wasn't one voice but several, layered atop each other, a cacophony of murmurs and hisses that slithered up through the silence. I strained to catch a word, anything that would make sense of the horror creeping through my home. The whispers intertwined, repeating one phrase, over and over. The fury that neither froze nor died. The words twisted into the darkness around me, filling the room like smoke. My hands went cold, and I couldn't breathe. That line, it was the same one from the book. The same line that the figure in the library had somehow known. And as the phrase repeated, I realized the voices sounded strained, as if whatever was speaking them was in pain, or dead. Suddenly, the whispers stopped. Silence rushed in to fill the void they'd left behind. And then, just as I thought I could breathe again, something loud crashed against the wall beside my bed, hard enough to rattle the picture frames. I shot out of bed, fumbling for the light switch. But just as my fingers brushed it, I froze. A presence stood at the far corner of my room. It was tall, lean, barely more than a silhouette, but it was watching me. Its eyes, empty, black voids, seemed to pulse with a dark light. It didn't move, but the air around it shifted, as though it was a mirage flickering in and out of existence. In a voice that sounded like it came from the depths of the earth, it spoke one word, cold and clear. Invited. I lunged for the light switch, flicking it on. The room flooded with brightness, and the figure vanished, leaving only the memory of those dark, pulsing eyes seared into my mind. I spent the rest of the night huddled in my living room, every light blazing. But the presence lingered, a cold heaviness that clung to every corner of my mind. And though I tried to calm myself, there was one, terrifying certainty that wouldn't let me rest. The whispers had said, the fury that neither froze nor died. But it wasn't just words. It was a warning. The warning gnawed at me, a slow terror that made the walls around me feel suffocating. I spent hours just staring at the door to my bedroom, half expecting that shadowed figure to materialize again. But the room remained empty, silent, though I could almost feel something, waiting. By morning, I felt detached, as if I'd drifted between worlds. My skin tingled, and my thoughts felt like they belonged to someone else, someone who was no longer truly safe. Despite everything, I felt a strange, obsessive pull to return to the library. Something in me needed, to read more. It was an urge I couldn't explain, but my feet took me there anyway, ignoring every alarm blaring in my mind. The library was deserted that early, except for the librarian, who was already behind his desk, hunched over something I couldn't see. When he looked up, he frowned, and there was a flicker of something in his gaze, fear? "You shouldn't have come back," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. But I was beyond listening to warnings. I headed straight to the dark corner, where I'd left the book. I felt that cold draft again, that sensation that something unnatural was leaking through the air around me, gathering weight. The black leather tome lay on the table as if waiting for me, its pages slightly open to the spot I'd last read. They were invited. I sat down, pulled the book close, and felt a chill slip through my fingers as I touched it. I flipped through the pages carefully, hunting for more about the phrase, for anything that could explain the voices that had filled my room last night. I found a section further in the book, where a shaky, uneven script described something called the third gate. There was a sketch, rough but meticulous, depicting what looked like a stone archway with strange carvings etched into its surface. The surrounding text claimed that this gate was hidden somewhere deep in the Ural Mountains, locked away from those who didn't know its secrets. It was only meant to be opened by those who were chosen, those who had been invited. Invited, the word crawled through my mind like a warning. It was then I noticed something strange. The edges of the pages felt damp, as though they'd been dipped in something viscous, and a smell began to permeate the air. It was faint but unmistakable, like the coppery scent of blood. I stared down, horrified, as faint red stains began to bloom across the page. The inked words blurred and twisted as the stains spread, each letter seeming to swell and bleed, forming a new word, written in dripping crimson ink. Come. The room felt smaller, the walls pressing in. I closed the book, heart pounding, and pushed back from the table. But before I could stand, the librarian appeared beside me, his face drained of color. His eyes darted to the book, and he reached out a trembling hand to close it, his fingers visibly shaking. "You don't understand what you're playing with," he whispered. "They don't invite just anyone." I opened my mouth to respond, but he shook his head and backed away, mumbling something under his breath that sounded suspiciously like a prayer. As I left the library, the chill from the night before seemed to cling to me, as if the cold had sunk into my bones. I reached my car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. I didn't feel safe, even here. The figure, those whispers, that single word etched in blood on the page. It all spiraled through my mind, tangling into something dark, heavy, inevitable. But it wasn't until I arrived home that the true horror set in. On my doorstep lay a single piece of paper, torn, brittle, with faded ink in that same trembling script. It bore only one line. Asterisk, you are chosen. You have been invited. Asterisk. And, just beneath it, something even more chilling, written in the same crimson as the book. Asterisk, your invitation will be honored soon. Asterisk. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering in my chest as the words sank in. Your invitation will be honored soon. I half expected something to crawl out from the shadows right there on my doorstep, to feel a cold hand on my shoulder. I looked around, but the street was empty, quiet, almost unnaturally so. I grabbed the note, crumpled it in my fist, and shoved it into my pocket. Part of me wanted to throw it away, to burn it, but I couldn't let go of it. It felt like the only connection I had to whatever was happening. I took a shaky breath, pulled myself together, and stepped inside, locking the door behind me. Every shadow in the house seemed alive with threat, every creak of the floorboards loud, amplified. After a restless night, I spent the next day scouring my town's records, hoping for some history or explanation that might shine light on the nightmare I was trapped in. I'd almost convinced myself it was paranoia, that I could will this horror away if I just ignored it long enough. But just as I was about to give up, something caught my eye in the town's oldest newspaper archives. Asterisk, local explorer disappears near Dyatlov Pass, last seen near rumored third gate. Asterisk. I read the article over and over, my heart racing. It described a man, a self-proclaimed explorer who had left for the Urals decades ago. The locals in the area had warned him about the pass, even calling it a path of no return, but he hadn't listened. According to witnesses, he'd claimed he was invited to find something beyond human understanding, a gate that could unlock answers to questions no one dared ask. The article ended abruptly, with a chilling note, asterisk, his last known communication referenced the cold fury that neither froze nor died. Asterisk, he had vanished without a trace. The phrase repeated again, curling through my mind. I felt a chill sweep over me as I tried to imagine what he'd found, or what had found him. My phone vibrated in my pocket, startling me. I pulled it out, fingers trembling, and saw an unknown number flashing across the screen. Normally, I would have ignored it, but something compelled me to answer. I pressed the phone to my ear, and for a moment, there was only silence. Then a voice, low and distorted, crackled through the line. It's time. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, cold dread pooling in my stomach. I wanted to throw it across the room, to scream, to do anything but stand there with that word echoing in my ears. But even as I considered leaving, disappearing from this town entirely, I knew it wouldn't matter. This invitation wasn't something I could outrun. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the faces of the Dyatlov hikers, eyes frozen open, mouths contorted in silent screams. I saw that figure from the library standing at the foot of my bed, dark and unmoving, with those hollow, pulsing eyes. But more than anything, I kept hearing that voice from the phone, low and resonant, repeating the same two words, it's time. When I awoke, the air was thick and still, as if the world itself was holding its breath. A sense of inevitability settled over me, and I knew, deep down, what I had to do. The following evening, I packed a small bag, took a deep, steadying breath, and left for the airport. The flight to Russia was a blur, filled with a growing dread and a nauseating certainty. The landscape outside the window grew harsher, colder, the trees starker and more barren. When I finally arrived at the edge of the Ural Mountains, I could feel an invisible weight pressing down on me, something ancient and patient waiting in the silence. The night was bitter, the wind slicing through my clothes as I hiked deeper into the mountains, toward the coordinates I'd scribbled from the article. The locals had watched me with wary eyes as I left the last village, as though they'd seen too many like me already. When I finally reached the clearing, the ground was empty, no signs of any path, no sign of any gate. Just an endless expanse of snow, silence, and darkness. The cold was relentless, biting through every layer I wore, but I forced myself onward. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was close, that something was drawing me forward. And then, just as the night grew its blackest, I saw it. A stone archway loomed in the distance, half buried in the snow, ancient and alien against the white expanse. It was taller than I'd expected, its surface rough and covered in markings that seemed to shimmer in the moonlight, almost as if they were alive, pulsing faintly with some dark energy. My legs felt like lead as I approached it, each step harder than the last. An invisible force seemed to resist my every movement, as though the ground itself were pushing me back. The closer I got, the more I felt something beyond the cold. A presence. It felt ancient, far older than the mountains around me, a raw power that seemed to peer out from the very stones, as if the gate itself were watching me. I swallowed hard, my breath clouding in the frigid air. The passage from the book echoed in my mind, and for a moment, I wanted to turn back, to run as far from that place as possible. But then, the voice from the phone rang out in my mind, low and relentless, it's time. There was no turning back. I reached out, my gloved fingers brushing the rough, icy stone. The second I made contact, a shock rippled through my arm, sharp and electric, almost like touching a live wire. My vision blurred, and I stumbled back, but something held me in place, an invisible tether binding me to the gate. And then I heard it, a deep, guttural whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, filling the air around me. Welcome. My mouth went dry. My heart hammered against my ribs, but some force compelled me forward. I stepped beneath the archway, feeling a wave of frigid air rush over me. The world shifted, the snow and sky blurring together, and then everything went black. When my vision cleared, I was somewhere else entirely. Gone were the mountains, the snow, and the biting cold. I stood in an endless field of gray, beneath a sky that was neither day nor night. Shadows stretched across the barren ground, and the air was filled with a low hum, a sound that seemed to pulse with life. But the strangest part was the silence that wrapped around it all, a quiet so complete it felt as if the world itself were holding its breath. I took a shaky step forward, and the ground beneath me rippled like water. I felt as though I was wading through something dense, something alive, with each step. And then I saw them. Figures stood in the distance, half hidden in the gray mist, unmoving, their forms twisted and unnatural. My heart froze as I recognized their shapes, the familiar outline of the Dyatlov hikers, still, silent, frozen in time. Their bodies were contorted in strange ways, arms and legs bending at unnatural angles. Their eyes were wide, empty, black pits that seemed to stare straight through me. One of them moved, a jerky, unnatural twist of the head, and I had to stifle a scream. It wasn't alive, not in any way I understood, yet something inside it moved, a darkness that pulsed in time with the hum around me. Its mouth opened, impossibly wide, a gaping void, and from it came a low, tortured moan that echoed across the field. I wanted to turn, to flee, but my body wouldn't respond. My feet felt rooted to the spot as the other figures began to move, each one turning toward me, their hollow eyes fixed on me with an intensity that felt like fire. A voice slithered through my mind, dark and seductive, cutting through the silence like a knife. You are invited to join us. The shadows around the hikers began to shift, writhing like tendrils of smoke, reaching out toward me, curling around my legs, my arms, pulling me closer. I could feel their icy touch, numbing my skin, seeping into my bones. No. The word came out as barely a whisper, my voice weak and strained, swallowed by the darkness around me. But the shadows tightened, pulling me further into the void. The hum grew louder, a deafening roar that vibrated through every cell in my body. The figures closed in, their twisted limbs reaching out, pulling me toward them, into their endless, silent despair. Their hollow eyes were filled with a darkness that was no longer human, a void that seemed to consume everything it touched. Just as their fingers brushed my skin, a violent shock shot through my body, and everything went white. The shadows evaporated, the humming ceased, and I felt myself falling, tumbling through an endless void, pulled back by some unseen force. When I came to, I was lying in the snow, back in the mountains, the archway looming over me like a silent sentinel. I lay there, gasping, as the cold bit into my skin, bringing me back to the harsh reality of the mountain. Snowflakes drifted down, their silence stark against the lingering echo of that otherworldly hum. I tried to sit up, but every muscle felt frozen, my body unresponsive, weighted down by an invisible force. Slowly, painfully, I forced myself to my knees, clutching at the snow for balance. My vision swam, and the edges of the world seemed to flicker, the images of those twisted figures and hollow eyes still burned into my mind. The thought of those shadowy tendrils, that silent, suffocating darkness, they lingered, as if pieces of that place had followed me back. I glanced at the archway, half expecting to see those figures on the other side, watching, waiting. But it stood empty, the symbols on its stone surface now dark, as if whatever life they had held was now extinguished. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching me. I took one shaky step backward, and then another, until I finally turned, intending to put as much distance between myself and that cursed place as possible. The snow beneath my feet crunched in the heavy silence, each step slower than the last as exhaustion took over. The cold seemed to reach deeper into my skin, its bite growing sharper with each passing second, and with a chill, I realized it was the same cold I had felt in that other place, a cold that didn't come from any natural source. Then, faintly, from somewhere behind me, I heard it. A soft, low whisper, like the rustling of leaves or the sigh of wind over frozen ground. It's time. I froze, my breath hanging in the air, heart pounding in my chest. The voice was unmistakable, the same rasping whisper I'd heard over the phone, the same one that had haunted my nightmares. I turned slowly, expecting to see something, anything, emerging from the archway. But there was nothing. Just the empty, barren expanse of snow and rock, silent and still. Trying to suppress the terror clawing at my insides, I kept moving, faster this time, half running despite the weight of my limbs, desperate to leave the mountains behind. I kept my gaze fixed forward, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was behind me, following me, its presence like a shadow that stretched over the snow, dark and all-encompassing. It was nearly nightfall by the time I made it back to the village. The townspeople watched me as I staggered into the square, their faces blank, their eyes knowing. They didn't ask questions, they didn't need to. It was as if they understood exactly what had happened, or what I had seen. An elderly woman shook her head slowly, whispering something to a man beside her, and I saw him cross himself. I found a small inn, barely more than a shack, and paid for a room without a word. As I stumbled through the narrow hall and into the dim, flickering light of my room, I finally felt the weight lift from my shoulders, as if I had left something behind in the snow. I locked the door, bolted the windows, and collapsed onto the bed, still fully clothed, too exhausted to do anything but close my eyes. But the moment my eyelids shut, I was back in that endless gray field, the twisted figures watching me with hollow, black eyes. I bolted upright, panting, cold sweat clinging to my skin. I tried to shake the images away, but they clung to me, woven into my mind like a sickness. The figures, the shadows, the dark, pulsing eyes, they were burned into my memory, each detail vivid and sharp. I lay back, staring at the ceiling, trying to focus on the small sounds around me, the ticking of the clock on the wall, the wind howling outside. But in the quiet, I heard something else. It started soft, almost imperceptible, but it grew steadily louder, echoing in the silence. It was that same, familiar hum. I sat up, heart pounding, staring at the door as the hum grew louder, vibrating through the walls, filling the room with that same dark, suffocating energy. I knew that sound, knew it came from that place beyond the archway, where shadows twisted and whispered secrets no human was meant to hear. And then, beneath the hum, I heard another sound, a faint, rhythmic knock on the door. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The knock came again, louder this time, as if whatever was on the other side was growing impatient. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, something spoke from the other side. Asterisk, come. Asterisk. My blood ran cold. I backed up until I was pressed against the far wall, my mind racing, trying to understand, to make sense of the impossible. But I knew, deep down, that there was no escaping this, no place I could run that would take me out of its reach. The knocking stopped. Silence fell over the room, thick and oppressive, and I held my breath, waiting, listening. Then, just as I thought it was over, the light in the room flickered, dimming until it was nearly gone, casting the walls in shadow. And in that darkness, I saw them, faint, flickering shapes twisting through the shadows, their forms long and distorted, their hollow eyes fixed on me. The hum grew louder, filling my mind, drowning out my thoughts, until all I could hear was that endless, maddening drone. The figures reached out, their twisted limbs stretching across the room, shadows that seemed to ripple and breathe, pulling me toward them. And then, in a voice that seemed to come from the depths of the earth, I heard the last words I would ever know. Asterisk, you have been chosen. You are ours. Asterisk. The shadows closed in, consuming the light, and I felt myself slipping, falling, pulled into the darkness. As the last remnants of the room faded away, the hum finally stopped, replaced by a silence so deep, so final, that it seemed to stretch on forever. When the world returned, I was somewhere else, somewhere I couldn't have described even if I'd wanted to. The air was thick and stale, heavy with the scent of damp earth and rot, and an unnatural cold seeped into my skin, colder than any winter night. I tried to move, to lift my arms, but my body wouldn't respond. It felt as if something held me there, something that thrummed with a dark, oppressive energy. Slowly, my vision cleared, and I found myself lying on a stone floor, smooth and polished, yet slick with something that gleamed darkly in the faint light. The walls around me were barely visible, swallowed by shadows that seemed to twist and pulse as though they were alive. I was no longer alone. Shapes loomed around me, shifting forms that seemed to meld into one another, their outlines dissolving and reforming in a grotesque, surreal dance. They had no faces, no defining features, only hollow voids where eyes should have been, eyes that seemed to absorb every trace of light. One of them moved closer, and as it did, I felt a pull in my mind, as if it was trying to draw something out of me, a memory, a thought, something vital. A searing pain shot through my skull, blinding, and a low, guttural voice echoed in my mind. Asterisk, you are chosen, a vessel. Asterisk. A wave of nausea washed over me as I realized what it meant. A vessel. These beings, whatever they were, intended to inhabit me, to fill the hollow spaces inside me with their twisted darkness, to make me a part of this place, as lost and twisted as the hikers who had come before me. And with that thought came another, even more terrible realization. I wasn't the first to arrive here. I wouldn't be the last. As if reading my thoughts, the figures around me seemed to shift, their forms growing sharper, more defined. I recognized the features on some of them, the contours of human faces, warped and stretched into something barely recognizable. I saw the remains of the Dyatlov hikers among them, their bodies twisted, eyes vacant and empty, mouths open in a silent scream that seemed to echo through the darkness. One of them, a figure with wild, hollow eyes and frostbitten skin, stepped forward. I couldn't look away, trapped by the sheer horror etched into its features, by the unearthly emptiness in its gaze. Its mouth opened slowly, releasing a chilling whisper that crawled into my mind. Asterisk, they found the gate. Just like you. Asterisk. The words sank into me like ice, and I realized what the entity meant. The gate, the archway, it wasn't just an ancient relic. It was a portal, a doorway to a place that held these beings, something that couldn't exist in our world. And each time it was opened, those who entered didn't return as themselves. They came back empty, hollow, their minds and souls devoured, replaced by the darkness that dwelled here. One by one, the figures encircled me, their faces vacant yet filled with a silent, consuming hunger. I felt the weight of their gaze, an endless, fathomless void that threatened to swallow me whole. My mind began to fracture, memories slipping through my fingers, fragments of my life disintegrating like dust. I clung to each one desperately, my childhood, my family, fleeting moments of laughter and warmth, all slipping away into the endless darkness. Then, through the noise, a single thought pierced the fog, a memory of something I'd read, buried in the pages of that cursed book. The fury that neither froze nor died. The line echoed through my mind, its meaning sharper now, clearer, and with it came a flicker of defiance. I wasn't the first, but perhaps, somehow, I could resist. I could fight it, I had to fight it. I gritted my teeth, forcing the thought to the forefront of my mind, holding onto it as if it were my last hope. The beings around me recoiled slightly, their forms flickering, as if the thought itself had pushed them back, had fractured the spell holding me in place. I felt a small surge of strength return, a sliver of control, and I used it to pull myself up, fighting against the suffocating weight pressing down on me. But the figures closed in, their whispers intensifying, filling the air with a maddening hum. They pressed against my mind, relentless, each one demanding a piece of me, clawing at my soul, trying to strip away what was left. I opened my mouth, though I wasn't sure I could still speak, my voice feeling like a distant echo. But I forced the words out, each syllable a battle, a scream against the darkness that threatened to consume me. Asterisk, I am not yours. Asterisk. The darkness around me shuddered, the figures' forms flickering violently, distorting as if my defiance had caused a fracture in their reality. The hum became a roar, deafening, a crescendo of rage and pain. The ground beneath me trembled, the stone floor cracking, fragments scattering into the darkness. And then, with a sudden, violent jolt, I was flung backward, through the shadows, the world dissolving around me. I tumbled through an endless void, spinning, falling, as everything faded to black. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on my back in the snow, the cold biting into my skin, the stars glinting above me like shards of glass. The archway was gone, as if it had never been there, leaving only the untouched snow around me, silent and undisturbed. I was alone, back in the real world, but I knew I would never truly escape what I'd seen, what I'd felt in that place beyond the gate. Those twisted figures, the hollow-eyed hikers, they were still there, waiting, watching, and I knew that one day, they would come for me. For once you are invited, you are never truly free. Certainly. Here's the final part for you. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on my back in the snow, the cold biting into my skin, the stars glinting above me like shards of glass. The archway was gone, as if it had never been there, leaving only the untouched snow around me, silent and undisturbed. I was alone, back in the real world, but I knew I would never truly escape what I'd seen, what I'd felt in that place beyond the gate. Those twisted figures, the hollow-eyed hikers, they were still there, waiting, watching, and I knew that one day, they would come for me. For once you are invited, you are never truly free.